do it. It's go time.
Hello and welcome to a very special Go Time GopherCon mashup. I'm Matt Ryer, and today I'm going to be putting your questions to members of the Go team. So please hang out in the Discord channel. It's Go Team AMA, and ask your questions in there. Let's see who's on the panel today then. Well, we're joined by Samir Ajmani. Hello, Samir, engineering director, and you run the Go team, right?
That's right. I manage the Go team at Google, and basically I have to keep everyone happy and get them all paid.
I'm sure they appreciate it. We're also joined by Cameron Balahan, who's looking at the product side of Go, right, Cameron?
Yeah, that's right. I'm a product manager. I'm one of two product leads for Go, along with Steve Francia. My focus in Go is primarily on the ID tools and security spaces, but I also work across all of Go, especially as it relates to how we position it in Google.
Yeah, very interesting to think of a programming language having a product. I'm keen to dig into that a bit more. We're also joined by Alice Merrick, who's a UX researcher, and you run the Go developer survey, right, Alice?
That's right. If you took the Go developer survey in the last couple of weeks, thank you very much. I'm a part of a small group of UX people that we work on various things, but yeah, the Go developer survey is definitely the largest or most visible one.
Yeah, what happens if you get nobody answering? Can you just have a day off?
That's never been a problem. We got over 10,000 responses this year. It was amazing.
Oh wow! Yeah, well, yeah. Great. Okay, well, we're also joined by Rob Findley. Rob, you do sort of the tools side of things, particularly generics, right? Recently.
Correct. Yeah, I'm on the Go tools team at Google, and I work on Go Please. But also recently, I've also been working on support for generics in the Go type checker and parser.
Yeah, so very, very cool. And everyone's very excited about generics. And I'm keen to also kind of understand what the impact of these kind of big language decisions are on the tools, because obviously it's a sort of domino effect down the chain, no doubt. And last but not least, we're joined by Keith Randall. Hello, Keith. You're sort of, what is your focus on the Go team?
I work mostly on the runtime and compiler. I do performance mainly, although I've been working on some of the generics implementation recently.
Very cool. Okay, so I feel like we're going to learn a lot about generics today, which is exciting. Yeah, so maybe we could kick off then, Samir. By the way, we're asking questions that have come from the community. So anybody watching live, if you want to head over to the Discord and ask your questions, we will try and get them answered for you. And we've had some questions in already. Samir, the Go team, like when it started, it was just kind of a few people, and it's grown so much over that time. What sort of challenges have you seen in that time as it's grown? What's changed?
That's a great question. Yeah, when I joined the Go team, I think it was 12 people. And now, including our cross-functional partners, we're upwards of 50. And wow. It's really quite remarkable growth over a period of time, but it's been a bit spiky. So a lot of our recent growth was in 2018, 2019. And so a lot of our time since there has really been about scaling our team and the way we work to really gel and, new processes and all the sort of managerial work to make sure the team works well. But it has allowed us to take Go from just being a language to more of an end-to-end platform. We have full-fledged IDE support. We have the Go command, which has been a platform, all sorts of extensions. Of course, there's a suite of libraries, and then our web suite around go.dev and package discovery site. So this larger team has enabled us to really build something much more holistic. So Go feels like Go throughout the various things developers have to do. In order to succeed, we've invested a lot in having more cross-functional partners. So on the call, we have Cameron and Alice, who are two examples, and we have many more. Challenge-wise, scaling the team, scaling the user base, scaling with larger uses of code. And a lot of this is driven by mainstream usage. So instead of our early adopters, we're now dealing with mainstream adopters, enterprise adopters who are maybe looking for a slightly different thing from Go. And security is top of mind, both for enterprises and all the supply chain security attacks. And Cameron, I'm sure, can help speak to more to those issues.
Yes, that's very interesting then. One of the things about Go that I think I appreciated when I first looked at the language was some of the principles, like the simplicity and some of the trade-offs and the taste that was kind of in the design. How do you make sure that people that join the Go team kind of really understand those principles? Is it something that you find you have to teach a lot, or do you find people that naturally think that way, or does it not matter? Do you prefer the mix?
It used to be that we hired a lot in the community, in which case we were hiring like-minded people. As we've grown and diversified, there's a bit more of an onboarding journey to sort of get the ethos across. I think a lot of it's peer-to-peer. New engineers will work with existing engineers on the team. Within Google, we have processes for helping people learn how to use Go and write idiomatic Go, and there's of course documents on this as well. But I think a lot of it, for example, our tech writer is a good example. He came in with great experience writing for enterprise users and had to learn really what the Go voice was, how we communicate. He also educated us on how to better connect with the users. So it's bi-directional.
That's very interesting. Yeah. So, and it's funny to think of Go really starting out as a language, and as you say, growing and like that. It kind of makes sense that you have a product perspective on it. So Cameron, how does that work? What sort of things do you care about as the product person for Go, the language and the tool chains and the community and the ecosystem?
Yeah, so it's not that different from something that's not an open source language ecosystem. Everything's different in its own way. We're not looking to monetize this or something like that sort. So there are some differences, but really it's got the same sort of things any product would have. You got to think about its strategic direction, like the complete end-to-end picture of what we're trying to accomplish and whether all the different pieces are lined up to sort of get us there. And then you also want to think about like you're the voice of the user. What is the sort of research we have, and what have our users been telling us, and how can we synthesize all of that to try to add more value and make Go a better product, a language that more folks want to use to accomplish their goals, and that's just our goal, and just to try to keep that whole vision together and moving forward as a coherent whole rather than a bunch of individual pieces.
Yeah. So do you foresee, have you seen any examples so far of like tension between a sort of technical perspective and a product perspective? Is it joined up quite nicely because of the nature of the project, or are there ever those sorts of disagreements between you?
I'd say not that many disagreements, really. It's like the whole Go team is interested in trying to make Go a better experience and something that contributes value. So we're all hungry to figure that out. And so, we all sort of collaboratively work together to try to do that. It's like nobody's really trying to just go engineer something that is off the value path. Everyone is looking to see what's next, what are our customers really looking to do, and how can we better service that? So I'd say the answer is no. It's all been a good, coherent thing together.
That's really interesting. And of course, a big part of product is hearing from users, as you say. And so that's another unusual thing, I think, that you wouldn't expect to have on an open source project of if it was just a programming language, is a user experience research. What sorts of things do you research, Alice?
Yeah, well, I'll talk a little bit about what I have researched and also what some of my fellow researchers have worked on. So the kind of the lower level stuff is too low level for us. We're kind of looking a little higher at things like developer workflows. So how how somebody might look for documentation or packages when they are writing Go, for example. Things like when you are in your IDE, what kind of challenges do you have there? When you're debugging, looking for those kinds of challenges and opportunities of where could we improve something, where could maybe introduce something new into the ecosystem as far as tooling goes, or smooth out some workflow there. So those are kind of some of the interesting questions that we've looked at. Another thing is that we do run the annual survey. So looking at, how happy are people using Go, and like, do we see more usage in particular areas, and like what are opportunities that we might want to grow? Cameron sort of mentioned leveraging some of that research on the product side. And then recently, we were looking at like, what are people really concerned about, as Go developers, and what other areas might we, branch into. This year, I did a study that was looked at specifically people who considered using Go and then didn't, and why. And is there something that we could do there that would make it easier for more people to use Go? So
if error doesn't,
and that's just
isn't it? That's the big complaint.
Yeah. Actually, no, but
what is it then?
Seems to be it's only a problem for people who are using Go, apparently.
Oh, fair point. Yeah.
Yeah.
But that doesn't drive people away. I met somebody once, and he just said, I saw how many times I had to write that, and I just thought, no. Proper dramatic. Yeah. So he wasn't.
That's true. They, and at that point, I might not have even spoken to them, because they didn't consider Go seriously enough to even make it through the filter of people for us to talk to. So that's true. They could have turned somebody off very early in the pipeline, and we just didn't find them.
Yeah. I think that's very interesting. Well, you see, I mean, I actually like it. I love the fact that we sort of are faced with errors all the time, and we have to deal with it in some way. I think that turns out to be a positive for us. But yes, I've heard that in the past. So obviously, generics is a big feature that's coming, and this was one that was talked about in the community for many years before. This one is a reason why I've heard people avoid Go, because for a particular class of problem, generics kind of are perfect. So Rob, you've been tasked with the responsibility of making generics work in the tools. What kind of impact does it have, and what sort of work have you had to do there?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really interesting to see the way such a large language change propagates throughout the tools ecosystem. And there's been a lot of work on support for generics in tools, which is how I'm interpreting your question. And I think there's a lot of work yet to do. I'll say that it was nice to see how much just worked once we updated like the parser and type checker. A lot of things in the basic editing of code in Go Please, for example, just worked. But where we've seen the most update required is for things like static analyzers, things like the vet command that need to understand Go code. Well, now there's a whole new way to understand Go code. You don't worry about the type of a variable anymore. You worry about which types of variable could be. There's many types that are possible. And so how do we manifest that in tools is an interesting question, and one that we're still exploring.
So, but with people with experience, like if they've used the AST stuff, if they used those packages, would that has that been completely rewritten, or is that just changed in a lot because of generics?
No, so we've had to preserve. I mean, we have the compatibility promise, and we've kept that promise. So we have updated those packages to support generic code. So we introduced some new constructs into those packages, but we've done it in what we hope is the least obtrusive way possible. And so a lot of those packages deal with generic constructs, like what's an object in a program, and that we've translated into the generic realm. So that's why a lot of stuff just worked, because those packages were updated in such a way that things just make sense, I hope.
Yeah, okay, that's very interesting. Well, yeah, we have a question from Aaron on Discord, and it's related to this. And Keith, this might be a good one for you since you've worked on generics, the compiler level. The question was, how are you measuring success of generics? How do we know if it was a good thing to have done or not in, say, 5 years?
Right, well, I think the major signal there is adoption. Like, how much do people actually use it? How much do they get value out of it? And that's a very nebulous evaluator, right? So it's sort of hard to say, like, if we get X adoption, we've had success, otherwise we fail. That's hard, but we can look at more specific things like, are there libraries that people write that use generics that other people then use? And so we can look for all kinds of signals about how much adoption is happening, how much new sort of interesting code is being written, how many people go from a V1 to a V2 where V1 didn't have generics and V2 does. So there's sort of things like that we could look at. I'm sort of look at generics at a much lower level, which is, make sure it doesn't crash, make sure that, it's as fast as writing the code out with a code generator, sort of all that kind of stuff. And that I can get more concrete evaluations of that sort of thing. And so that's sort of where I'm at. I think at a higher level, at like Sameer's level, they're thinking more about how do we measure adoption, and that's a more nebulous thing. I'm very concerned about, is generics 2% slower, and is that enough, or is it too much, and why, and can we fix it? That's the sort of stuff I concentrate on.
Yeah, okay, interesting. So on that then, oh, sorry, Sameer, were you going to say something?
Yeah, I can pick this up if you want to hear the higher level success criteria. Like, for the last several years, we've been running the developer survey now, I think at least since 2016. And
yeah, this is the 6th year.
Wow.
Right. And a few things have been sitting at the top of the what I want from Go list, and generics has been number one. Dependency management, I think, was up there. If you look at our issue tracker, fuzzing is up there. And better support in my editor. We've really taken all of that to heart, and really, we took our time with generics because we needed it to feel like Go. And I think Robert and Ian's talk this morning really showed the effort that was taken to really make it fit with the language really beautifully. Our hope is that it's not necessarily that we need people to adopt generics a lot. So it's not like more generics is better, but generics should solve the problems designed to solve. And so we want to really see that whatever problem people were saying, oh, we need generics to solve, that concern goes away. And if we've resolved that concern, if we've resolved dependency management, vulnerability scanning is another one, right? We resolve that, what then starts bubbling up in the concern list, right? So this allows us to look at the next set of concerns and resolve that. And hopefully we just keep making Go better for the users over time.
And if people want to influence that process, then I guess the developer survey is the way that you're asking
That's
them
a good way to do it. Definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely tell me all about it.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay, so here's an interesting question from Segfault AX. Do you expect there'll be any changes to error handling idioms post generics? So this is kind of a general question in lots of ways.
So Matt, we did try.
You certainly could. We'll put the drums in post, don't worry.
Yeah, so we did explore simplifying error handling with the try proposal a few years ago. And our assessment, or the assessment of the community, really not ours, was that it didn't make things better. That the explicitness, the debuggability of the current way of handling errors was simply better. That all the work we tried to do with sort of condensing the syntax and then moving the handlers up to defer, it just made things worse. And so I think this is a case where we really want to understand what is the problem, right, that users are struggling with. And I think people like Alice and Todd, our other UX researcher, can really help us dig into that. That'll help us understand what solution we should be going for. But I think we need to understand the problem better first.
I think it is an interesting question of whether generics is a new tool in the toolbox that can make a new interesting design that may be better in some way or another. And I don't think anyone's come up with a good answer to that question yet, but it's certainly something to explore.
Yeah, I mean, for sure, like if you've got code that's working in a generic way, I expect the errors to kind of work in a generic way, potentially. Like if it's going to return some object that contains a value that, there's some error to the value or whatever, then I could see that kind of thing happening quite easily. Is anyone worried about us overusing generics? This was one of the big arguments that people make against having generics in the language, is that it can be abused. How do we feel about that? Are we worried?
Yes.
What's the remedy?
Education, I think, setting a good example. But honestly, we need the community to help with this. This isn't something that can come top down, right? I think, Go has a reputation for being a simple, comprehensible, readable language. It is very easy to use generics to create things that make code inscrutable. And so I think we as a community, when we do code review, when we adopt libraries, need to be conscious of the trade-off we make between perhaps a deep functional one-liner that is very concise but very inscrutable, hard to debug, hard to manage the performance of it, versus the more explicit way we write things in Go that, costs you a little bit more typing, but when you have to debug and optimize it, it's way simpler. So like that's where my head is at, but I would love to hear from others on the panel.
Any of the takers?
Yeah, one thing that is coming out in 1.18 is generics for the core, but like much of the standard library doesn't have any generics in it. In fact, there are only a couple of packages that were added that had generics in it. Most of the rest of the standard library is still pre-generics. And so we want to find a way, probably in 1.19, to make some of those packages generic. And when we do that, we'd like to set a good example by making them generic in a way that makes sense. And so I think to some extent, we'll be piloting a good, I don't know what you call it, a good experience with converting existing code to generics, and maybe in addition, adding like the maps package or whatever, some other new package, and what does a good generic code look like? And I think that will help. And if you're interested in what good generic code looks like and don't want to wait for 1.19, you can sort of follow along in the CLs or on the issues to look at what the prototypes look like.
Very cool. So do you expect there to be generic versions of some of the libraries and you can kind of have both because of the backwards compatibility? Or will there be types alongside non-generic types inside the packages? How do you see that happening?
Well, we're certainly not going to break any existing code. So we sort of have to leave the things as is. There's some discussion about how we might add generics in a backwards compatible way to function so that sort of the type inference all magically works out. I don't think we know whether that's possible yet, but we're talking about it. And if not, then there'll be a set of parallel, different packages or different names within the same package that will be the generic versions of various things like container list and whatever else.
Yeah.
And you can automate migration from, the say interface-based version to a generic version as well. But this should be fairly straightforward.
Oh, I see. Yeah, help people out with tools. And speaking of tools, I wonder what was the biggest challenge? What was the hardest thing to do when trying to get generics to work with the tools? Was there one thing in particular that stood out as difficult?
I would say that Robert's probably the better one to speak to this, but I can say that the overall theme has been that because this is the biggest change that we've ever made to the language, by its nature, it's very deliberate. I couldn't identify a specific thing as well as Robert could, though. So maybe I'll yield to him to potentially give you a better answer than that.
I can tell you the package.
Oh, yeah.
So the more that a tool needs to understand about your Go program, the more difficult it's going to be to update. And so in our code base, the most sophisticated package that we have like this is the SSA package. And so there's still more work to be done there. And I know other external third-party tools like Static Check also use a form of SSA. So those things are hardest to update.
So with the reflect package, is it that there'll be extra methods and things in there, but all the other stuff will still work, but you need there'll be a way to find out if it's a generic type and things like that get added?
So it turns out that a lot of the generic stuff is completely gone by the time you get to runtime. So there's very little in reflect that needs to understand anything about generics.
Does it just see the types that they end up being then?
Right. So if you have a generic function that has a generic type in it and you make a reflect value out of that thing, if you ask what type it is, it'll be the real concrete type of it. It won't be the generic type of it. So almost everything in generics is in the compiler. There's some stuff at runtime, but it's pretty minor, like putting better stack traces than you would get otherwise, and various inlining heuristics and stuff. But all that stuff occurs at compile time. There's very little at runtime that you need to worry about, and particularly reflect is all going to work the same way as it did. The names will be a little weirder because they'll have brackets in them, but otherwise you won't notice a difference.
That's very interesting then. Yeah, so obviously generics was, sorry, yeah, Rob.
I was going to say, Keith just reminded me of one other thing that was difficult, which is producing good error messages.
Right. Yeah, well, we do appreciate good error messages, to be fair, so it is worth it. Actually, that's an interesting kind of point. When we think of like generics was at the top of the developer survey most wanted list for a while, but how do you decide what to work on? How does that happen? Does it happen somewhat organically? Do you have some process where you think about it? And I'd also like to hear your thoughts more generally. And we had a question specifically on Twitter from Tim Heckman, who asked about governance and how you think it should be, like how these things should work and will work in the future.
I guess I'll take this one, or at least
Yeah,
start us off. Yeah. You know, we do want to be informed by our users. So we start with our users, in the developer survey as one example, but Alice and her partner Todd on the UX team have done a number of studies to really help us zero in on pain points. And then our product team, Cameron and Steve, look at the broader ecosystem, look at specific users, use cases. They look at, specific. They look at things in aggregate and also look at the strategic landscape, like how is software engineering changing. So as I mentioned earlier, one thing top of mind is security. When we interviewed certain large-scale enterprise customers, one of their first questions was, how do we check programs for vulnerabilities, right? You know, and there's a compliance reason for that, but it turns out when we interviewed the users, like, it's top of mind for all the developers because it's scary, right? And so we knew we wanted to make that streamlined and easy. And it turns out that the work we did on modules actually really helps us with this, right? That we're able to build a vulnerability checking system that leverages modules and packages. And then we have a team that works on deep static analysis. We're able to leverage their work to really build something much more precise than you might get just checking module level for finding vulnerabilities. So it's a bit of looking at what developers are concerned about and how to meet those needs, and also looking at what assets we have. Like the fact that we have modules, the fact that we have stack analysis means we can do something really interesting that still helps solve the user problem, but in a differentiated and better way. We save you time by eliminating a lot of false vulnerability reports, for example. That's just one example. I think the other major driver is that we have a lot of users, and users are going to have production issues, scaling issues, performance issues, and we'll get reports from all over the place. And then we've got our IDE and web. So we do listen to our users and we prioritize the issues we're hearing from that. And some of those turn into larger projects to make, strategic changes to what we have.
I think I'll add a little bit. It is a bit organic, actually. We all sort of think about this together. We take all the data that we have, we synthesize it. We try to see what's prevalent in the landscape overall, and how we're fitting in that scheme. We're also thinking, and this is similar to something Samir said, but maybe a little bit different, is we think about the whole end-to-end experience. We think about like what it's like to be a Go developer, what you are trying to achieve as a Go developer, and of those options, how can we be sure that each part of that chain is accounted for and is a good experience? And if it's not a good experience, how can we make it a good experience? And then we think about how we're going to integrate with, like, security, for example, which is a really important topic right now. And we know that Go is very well positioned for that because it's always has a strong focus on security from the start. And now that it's becoming a more important, scarier issue, we think we're well positioned to work our strengths, think about that end to end, and say, all right, at this stage, what kind of security would I want to be thinking about as a developer? Do I want to, what vulnerabilities do I want to know about right now? And what do I not want to know about at some certain stage? What might overwhelm me and detract from the overall experience? So, the sum of my message there is we try to think about it holistically, and we start with the user in mind and the user's goal as the sort of end of this journey. And we try to pack in all of our data and everything that we learn and then talk about it internally. And we're all very passionate about making Go a better product. So together we're able to accomplish this, and we're always interested in hearing from the users as to how we're doing and how we can do better and what we may be missing.
Yeah, very interesting. And actually, there was a release today on this very day. Go 1.17.5 and 1.16.12 were released, and that was they're somewhat probably easier decisions to make because these are security related. What's the sort of process for that? How do they happen, and at what point is there a decision that this is important enough that we're going to do an update and a release?
We have an extremely talented security and releases teams who make these decisions, and they basically say, we need to do this. And we say, we're not even in the way. Basically, I got told yesterday that it was happening. I got told this morning that it was done. And, there's a deep trust in the expertise these teams have.
Yeah, no one's going to say to the security team, nah, it'll be fine. You can never say that, can you?
You only live once.
Yeah. I do think this serves what Cameron described and what we were just describing, bridges a bit over into governance. Go is unusual in that we have this, talented, well-paid employed team at Google who's driving this major open source project. We do try very hard to engage productively with the community, and we've tried to increase our transparency over time. I think Russ Cox has done a lot of work to make the proposal review process more transparent and things like that. In the end, we also try and build a highly functioning cross-functional team that leverages the diverse talents we have, like Cameron's analysis and several others. And we believe this is an asset to the community. We serve the community better by building this highly functioning, well-managed team. If I can take some credit for that. So the question of governance comes down to what are the problems we're trying to solve, right? And this is where we want to hear the community. Like, what's not happening that you would want to see happen? Because governance is a solution to a problem. And again, we'd want to really understand the problem well to understand how best to serve the community in that way.
Yeah, no, that really does make sense. Okay, so we've got a fun question coming at you now. We're going to do a quick round table. I'm just going to say your name and then just tell me what IDE you use day to day generally. Samir, what's your IDE?
Google Docs and Gmail. No, on the rare times that I code, it's VS Code because I want to use what the team is developing, the VS Code ID plugin, Go Please. But it's rare that I get to code. It's sad.
Yeah. I should just say this question came in from Billy Drop Tables. And Billy wants to know what everyone's IDE is. Cameron, do you use an IDE?
Well, I certainly don't do any of that for work, but in my own time, I am a Vim user, but also a VS Code user because I like to use our products and know what's going on. But previously, Vim.
Oh, Vim. There you go. You've just
previously Emacs over here.
Oh, there we go. Yep, it didn't take long, did it? You've just done loads of street cred though, Cameron, by the way. Alice, how about you? What's your IDE of choice?
I've actually got VS Code on in the background here. I don't have to code very often. Mostly it's just R scripts, because I'm just doing some data analysis. But VS Code is it's handy.
Yeah, and you've got it open now. You're just working on something.
Yeah, I was just working on generating some graphs.
Fair enough. None taken, Alice. This fraction of your attention we're getting is great. So
yeah, it's yeah. I mean, it's definitely on a different screen. It's like
what can you
not even looking at it.
Yeah, it doesn't count if it's not on the same screen. It's not rude.
Yeah.
Rob, how about you? you work on tools a lot, so do you have to use the same ones that the users are using too?
I primarily use Vim, but I also work on VS Code, so I use VS Code as well, so I can understand the way that GoPlease looks in VS Code and in Vim, and sometimes I even use Emacs.
Oh, there you go. And then what about you, Keith? What's your IDE?
I'm an Emacs diehard. So I
Yep.
use Emacs with a bunch of plugins. I've tried the VS Code, or sorry, the GoPlease plugin, which works pretty well. And I've got that set up on my Linux machines. I still don't have it set up on my Mac, which I need to do. And that's sort of my primary sit down and code platform. So I still don't use it day to day, but I have used it in the past. But yeah, Emacs is my editor.
Yeah, these text-based editors, when because I use a mouse or a trackpad, so I've never been into that, and I used to have Windows, and so there's so much point and click and stuff in MS Access and Visual Basic. But yeah, when I see that it looks like magic still. It looks like the Matrix, like people are tapping stuff and things are happening. It's amazing. I love it. So, okay, we have another question here from Makaki. They say, "Hi, Go team. If there was anything you wanted to remove from Go, what would it be?" And so this is assuming that there's like a go-to, or you can do breaking changes now. What would you break? And Keith, since we're chatting, why don't you start?
That's a good question. I'm not a big fan of the 3-argument slice operation. I think there should be a slice to length and slice to capacity operations as separate things. And I lost that argument many years ago when we first edited it, and I'm still angry about it.
So you would have had 2, so you could either specify the capacity or the length. Is that right?
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you often don't want to modify the capacity. You're generally just slicing because of the length, and it's only occasionally when you need to talk about the capacity.
Yeah.
In which case you don't need to talk about the length, or you could do that as a separate slice. It makes the language a little bit simpler. But yeah, otherwise, it's not a huge deal. It doesn't come up one way or the other either all that much.
Yeah. No, but that's a nice answer. Rob, do you have an answer for this? What would you like to get rid of?
It's really tough. Nothing significant. I think. I think it's easy to answer this once we land generics, right? There's a lot of stuff that we would write differently if we had generics. A lot of the built-in functions would be just a generic function. So yeah. I think that's probably maybe it's a cop-out, but that's my answer.
No, but that's a good point. And like with generics, that's the interesting thing, isn't it? You almost wish you could just go back and rewrite the standard library. And to be honest, there's even code in the standard library that doesn't now look very Go because it was written so early. So that's sort of always the curse you bear, really, with the backwards compatibility promise. But everyone's grateful, I think, for that promise. And any others? Anyone else got anything that they'd remove from Go if they were allowed to? Samir, what would you do?
I'll mention a few. Range variable loop capture. So this is just, it bites all of us when we write closure inside a range loop. That may still be fixable, depends. I think the confusion around nil pointers inside an interface and that not being nil itself, like the whole question of reuse of nil in interfaces just creates a lot of confusion. I wonder if we could have done better there. And buff.io scanner. I don't like APIs where you run a loop and then you have to check whether the loop exited because of an error, because you always forget to check. And I'm sensitive to this because back when I used to write C++ and I was on the maps team, I had a loop. I had a similar API where I forgot to check for an error, and I dropped 500,000 places from the map index.
Oh wow!
Because I forgot to check that error. So when we introduced buff.io scanner, I'm like, no, that will create really terrible bugs. But again, lost that argument.
Did that just wipe out like loads of restaurants?
No one noticed. So I think if you drop 500,000 random places from the location index, you're unlikely to hit stuff that's very important.
Oh wow!
But,
there you go.
I stayed up late and fixed it.
Just type them all back in from the phone book. Very nice of you. You got to
regenerate the index. Yes.
Okay, fine. Yeah, sure. Yeah, they're good ones. I would actually probably like to get rid of the new keyword and just have the curly brace way of making things, because I always use that anyway. And now if I see new, I'm like, what? Although I quickly do remember, to my credit. Okay, so will there be a go-to? Johan Brandhorst actually asked this one on Discord, and so did Tahal Altinel. So did Tahal Altinel. Will there be a go-to?
I don't think we're going to make breaking changes to Go. I think we'd rather find ways to support people, fix things like maybe some of the things we just described, range variables, for example, without breaking users. Like maintaining compatibility for users, like we would much rather do work on our end to minimize the work that the whole Go community has to do to adapt to these changes. So I think once you set aside breaking changes, go-to becomes a marketing term. And I think it would probably break a lot more things than it would fix.
I think the one remaining big language thing is the errors problem, and whether we ever come up with a fix for that, and whether that fix requires language changes and how extensive they would be. I could conceivably see something go-to coming out of that, but I don't see anything else even on the horizon that would cause us to force us to go to a go-to.
Now, I suppose it would just be if it'd have to be a significant enough change, wouldn't it, to warrant something like that. But I'm kind of glad that we don't have these multiple languages, like Python code from one major version won't work on another. And the fact that our Go code has that long life, I think really does help us out a lot. And we sort of rely on that, which is pretty important. Anyone else? Anything else they'd remove? If not,
the G. Just
sorry?
keep it BO. Remove
Just
the
O?
G.
Yeah,
Just O.
that'd be good.
Okay.
There you go. That's cool. Yeah.
Make it easier to do the internal Go links.
Yeah, that would be easier. Typing out most project names would be one character easier. Yeah. The command that kicks off a Go routine would just be
There you
O.
go.
It would just be an O routine at that point.
I mean, 50%, just cut that task time in half.
Yeah, honestly, the amount of internet that would save, I don't know the exact numbers, but I think it's a lot.
I like the idea that O is just the completion of the C.
Yeah. There you go.
Yeah, there you go.
Missed opportunity, Alice. Good call.
Yeah. I wasn't on the team back when.
No,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Too late now.
Well, maybe the next breaking version, you can really break it by changing its entire name. It'd be Olang. Yeah, it could. I'm not against it. Okay, there's another interesting question that came in from Def Piano on Discord, and Def Piano asks, do any of y'all use GitHub Copilot for work, either Go or another language, or on personal projects? Have you played with GitHub Copilot?
I don't think I know what GitHub Copilot is.
Oh, Keith, it does your programming for you. It does all your programming for you.
Well, then what would I do day to day if it did all my programming for me?
Chill out. No, you still have to do some programming, unfortunately, but
I could day drink instead of doing programming. It'd be great.
Does it look up things on Stack Overflow for you?
It learns, it learns, and it knows smart enough not to pick the top answer to scroll down a bit, which is
always go with the second answer.
Yeah, exactly. Well, yeah, it's kind of well, I'm not going to sell it. If you've not heard of it, I think that speaks volumes. He does all his programming himself, does Keith. This is actually, we've reached our time. This is all the time we've got. But thank you so much to everybody who's joined us and joined along and asked questions in the Discord. And thank you to Samir, Cameron, Alice, Rob, and Keith. And we'll see you next time on Go Time.